I watched this video and I was so angry and I was so annoyed. I nearly went up in flames. Seriously, I nearly caught fire. It's a bleeding joke. If you watch this, shared ownership don't get it. No, it's not good enough. Hi guys, so today on YouTube I watched the documentary BBC Panorama, The Home I Can't Afford, Shared Ownership. So this documentary is about shared ownership and how shared ownership works as a scheme for those who cannot afford to get onto the property ladder through more affordable means. What this means is I can't buy a house, so I decide to go through the shared ownership route because it is cheaper. That means I will only own a part of my property. The other part of my property is owned by the housing association. So I pay rent and I also pay a mortgage. However, this is supposed to be cheaper than buying a property altogether and I own it 100%. This is a form of social housing because many people cannot afford to buy properties anymore. So the government introduced this scheme. It has been around since the 70s, but more and more properties are being built under shared ownership. So this will help me buy a house if I cannot afford it. As you know, this is very problematic and I'm going to speak about it. And this scheme clearly preys on those who are financially vulnerable. It preys on people who are poor because the only people that are going through the shared ownership route are those who cannot afford to buy a property outright. And let me tell you something. You can eventually own 100% of your property, but the majority of shared owners cannot afford to buy 100% of their properties. Now, let me talk about one massive problem first. That is service charge. Service charge when it comes to shared ownership is unpredictable and changes anyhow and changes ridiculously. Service charge usually covers your property upkeep, maintenance, gas bills, etc. etc. I said to you already, you only own a part of the property. So you can own 25% of the property. However, you are going to be paying 100% service charge. How does that make sense? You are paying 100% service charge and the housing association is paying nothing. Let's talk about how problematic service charge is and how the prices change without them telling you. So one woman, initially she was told that she's only going to be paying £1,800 a year service charge. It has now gone up to £3,257 a year. She's on universal credit. She cannot afford it. When you buy a property with shared ownership, they tell you the service charge can go up or down. However, you don't know how much it's going to go up or down by. So it's completely unfair. One man was saying how when he bought his property 4 years ago, service charge was $2,300. 4 years later, it's $4,400. For what? Extra concierge costs. What does that even mean? What does that even mean? Extra concierge costs. Is this a bleeding joke? It's not a bloody hotel. You don't need a flipping, what? I'm assuming a receptionist in an apartment. For what? What do you need them for? And then the price is rocketing up unreasonably. The man is saying he can't afford it. And the housing association says, if you don't pay, we're going to repossess your property. And unfortunately, when it comes to shared ownership, if they repossess your property, you lose everything. You lose the deposit, you lose all the money you put into your house. Whereas if you had bought the property outright, like a mortgage where you own 100% of the house, you can get your money back. You can sell off the property. You can get your deposit back. Unfortunately, the increase when it comes to service charge is not clear at all. Let me talk about a more ridiculous case. Oh my gosh. There was one woman. The problem is when it comes to shared ownership, a lot of the properties are new builds. Now, you're probably thinking, what's the problem with new builds? Unfortunately, some new builds are just not built up to scratch. Some new builds, for some reason, they haven't built them properly. And this woman is living in the house. And when she moved into the house, shortly after, she wasn't told this, by the way, shortly after her basement began to flood with sewage. There was patches in her pipes. She would call up the housing association or maintenance and tell them, hi, my basement is flooded with sewage. You could see toilet paper, for crying out loud. And they would tell her some rubbish, like cover up the patch with gaffer tape or whatever the hell that is. Excuse me, what are you talking about? What do you mean cover up the patches with tape? Gaffer tape is basically a black bit of tape. How ridiculous. Or they will tell her to wait, but then her house will become damp and it will become filled with mold. I remember her saying that it took 6 months for them to complete the work. I need to talk about service charge in this case because this is insane. This is absolute lunacy. Initially, when she moved in, the service charge, guys, listen to me. The service charge was £150 to £200 a month. Listen to how much it went up, guys. I'm about to scream. Her service charge went up to £3,000 a month. Who the hell on this earth can afford £3,000 a month in service charge alone? That's not your mortgage and your rent. £3,000, she has to pay the full thing. For what? You've given her a ramshackled building and you're telling her to put tape on the patches and she has to pay 100%. What an absolute joke. And if you're even thinking about getting shared ownership, you better forget about it, because the woman on this program, she represents housing associations or whatever she calls herself. She said 60% of customers are satisfied, as if that's a good thing. So what about the 40% that are dissatisfied? What an absolute joke. What an absolute joke. 40% is nearly 50%. 40% of people are dissatisfied. You're sitting there all smug, talking like that's okay. Are you having a bleeding laugh? How the hell does somebody's service charge go from £200 a month to £3,000 a month? How the hell is that reasonable? And you've put them in a shoddy, ramshackled, stupid, useless building with sewage running through the basement and that. How do you even make such a mistake? How can somebody be having sewage running through their house? What kind of joke is this? What is that? Is that as if we're living in the Victoria times? What kind of rubbish? That's the service charge. That's the problem. So that should be enough to put you off from getting shared ownership, because you only own about 25% of the house and they're telling you to pay 100% service charge. For what? And then they'll start telling you, oh, we don't get any profit from service charge. Housing associations are not about profit. Liar. Fire go thunder you. What do you mean? What business is not there for profit? I'm not having it. Even when I hear the word non-profit organisation, they all want profit. You ain't lying. You ain't fooling me, man. It's a joke. This woman is in arrears. She owes about £20,000 to the Housing Association to fix up her house. She owes them about £20,000. And the Housing Association answered her that because of the benefits of the scheme, that's fair. What benefits? What blood clot benefits? She doesn't own the full property. She owns about, 25%. You're making her pay 100% service charge. You're talking about the benefits of the house. What benefits? Because let's talk about more cons, not just service charge. There was a woman who lives in the Cotswold. She bought, I don't even know what the hell that is, but apparently average housing there is £400,000, way more than the national average. £400,000 for a house in the Cotswold. You're having a bleeding laugh. Anyway, this woman ended up struggling for whatever reason, paying her house. She wanted to sell it off. It's very difficult to sell houses under shared ownership. She couldn't sell the house unless she extended the lease. And she had to pay £15,000 to extend the lease. Let me quickly go into this lease kind of stuff. When you buy a house or when a property is first sold, there is a lease on it. That lease can be 999 years, 125 years, doesn't matter. It can be a certain amount of years. Every single time a year goes by, the lease drops. When you try to sell a house with a lease that has less than 80 years, it's harder to sell. So unless you pay a stupid amount of money to extend the lease, it's very hard to resell these houses. Whatever lease you find on the house is the lease that is on the house. The woman here is complaining she wasn't told clearly about the negatives with owning with leasehold properties and owning a property that has a lease of less than 80 years. She wasn't told it was difficult to sell. Her neighbours weren't told. Remember, these are people who are vulnerable, who are poorer, who can't really afford to buy a property outright. They go through this route. This is meant to be social housing. They're meant to advise her, give her financial advice. What's wrong with the impact of having a property with a lease than less than 80 years? It's going to be hard for you to sell. They never told her this. Her neighbours didn't know this. It's not fair. When you extend a lease, the money goes to the housing association. Guinness, the housing association here in this program, said 1,500 of their properties have leases less than 80 years. Anyone that wants to resell will have to extend their lease. If every single person in those properties extends their lease to resell, that company will earn £20 million. They're going to tell you there's no profit involved. We're putting it back into the housing association. I call rubbish. That's nonsense, mate. Absolute nonsense. Because we could talk about Clarion. They're a housing association. They bought properties which already had 999-year leases on them. But when they went to go and sell them to people, shared ownership owners, they cut the lease to about 125 years. Why? So it's not that they can't give them a lease of more than 80 years. They've chosen intentionally not to, so they can reek your pockets dry later on. Some people can't sell their property because they need a certificate to show that it is safe from fires since Grenfell. It can take many years to get this certificate, and until you get that certificate, nobody's going to buy your house. So that's another reason why those of shared ownership find it hard to sell their property. All I'm going to say is don't get shared ownership. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.